Before we jump in, if you're serious about building a sustainable career in music, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to FiXT Academy. We bring in actual operators from within the industry to share practical insights you can apply right away.
Our October FiXT Academy Industry Panel event, going to be discussing the state of music production for independent artists and labels. Got an awesome panel lineup here with Joel Wanasek, Eric Emery, and Nico LaRocca. And I will, hopefully I didn't butcher any of those names too bad.
LaRocca. I've never said your name out loud before. Killed it.
So our mission here at FiXT Academy is to empower artists to build sustainable careers in ways not previously possible to them, which is an extension of our mission statement from FiXT, the parent company, which we're a record label and music publisher. And we just want to empower and inspire more artists and fellow colleagues in the industry through these programs and panels. So Joel, you have such a legacy in this space, and particularly in hard rock and metal, for all the work you've done over, I don't know the exact date, but maybe the last 2 decades, 20 years. Yeah. Couple weeks. And we have enjoyed getting to work with you. You've been doing some mix and production work with a few FiXT artists, but I will turn it over to you for, anything you'd like to share about kind of a quick intro of your background.
Well, geez. Okay, I'll try to be brief. I'm a mixer, predominantly. I also have a few businesses that I own, the software drum sample plugin company type thing called DrumForge. That's drumforge.com. I also have one of the largest audio mixing schools on the planet, which is URM, or also known as Nail the Mix. So if you're trying to learn how to mix stuff and you want to learn from all of the best producers, like right now we're actually trying to get Eric on to do a Nail the Mix. That's the place to go. So make sure that you check that out at urm.academy. But aside from that, I mix a lot of songs, and it's a pleasure to be here, James. So thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, hope to have you on. And I don't know if we could drop a little teaser of a guest that we're planning to have on Nail the Mix, if you're okay sharing it.
Go for it.
So we're still locking down a date, but after many years of trying to make it happen, we're going to get Clayton and get a Cell Dweller Nail the Mix in 2026. So it will happen.
So excited for that, man. Clayton is sick, insanely talented. He's so incredible.
Looking forward to that. And then Eric from Emery Recording Studios out in LA.
That's me.
Have really enjoyed getting to know you the last couple of years and meeting up in person, and have been looking for a project to officially work on with you, but appreciate you coming on the panel. And I know your background, you're a vocalist yourself. You do a lot of vocal production, writing, producing, engineering. But yeah, what would you want to share about your background and history?
I mean, you pretty much summed it up there. I've been mixing and producing for about 20 years now. Started from Ohio originally and toured in a band around the world for a while. It was awesome. Was the singer of a prog metal band. And yeah, mostly just trying to focus on mixing these days. Ultimately, I just want to be like 100% mixing and produce occasionally, which is kind of what I've been doing lately.
Awesome. And yeah, you've got some substantial credits under your belt and some like Grammy nominated records and projects. So super stoked to have you here. Thanks for being a part of this.
Thanks, man.
And Nico from Thriller Records and A&R perspective here on production. And we just got connected through Joel. So it's been great to connect with you recently, get to know you a little bit. Looking forward for your perspective. And I know you have some production background as well that I think probably helps as an A&R. So share a little bit about your background and what you do.
Yes, but I want to make it clear it's very limited compared to these guys. I never did any type of work to that level, but
that's not true. Nico did the Black Album by Metallica. He's just being shy.
Stay humble, dude. I gotta stay humble. But yeah, no, it was a very short stint in production and artist career. I moved out here to LA when I was just graduating high school. I went to this school called Icon Collective in Burbank. RIP. I think they're not around anymore as of this year, but yeah, it was a great experience. I was around a lot of like-minded artists and stuff, but we had some music business courses, and I really enjoyed that side of learning and being in the atmosphere of that school. I just really gravitated towards it. So I've been doing A&R stuff for loosely about 9 years now, but I would say legitimately 4 years now with Thriller and our sister label, InVogue Records. And yeah, I try to keep that artist producer friendly brain in perspective when I'm trying to build out records and just sign artists in general and look for cool things that really pique my brain. But yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Well, good to have you here, and again, have multiple different perspectives. And we're going to dive into some questions that I'd like to just throw out at all four of you on the panel. So feel free to jump in and then go around. And this is probably going to be so general that this could really go anywhere. So take this thread wherever you guys want to take it. I really want to, cover a few different topics, but starting with kind of the state of music production in 2025. What do you think has changed over the last couple of years? And, whether that's over the last 5 years, 10 years, but if you think about where we are right now to kind of thinking to like some prior eras, what are some of the biggest differences that impact what you do in terms of music production?
Who wants to go first?
You talked first, you get it.
Okay. The biggest differences for me, I mean, just budget is dramatically different nowadays. The amount of time spent has shortened a little bit because of that. I think also technology, the prevalence of technology has really helped in some capacity to kind of make delivery a lot faster and more efficient, sometimes at the expense of the sonic component, which I'm finding people are caring less about sometimes. I'm an old school kind of guy, so I like miking up a drum kit and doing real amps and all that stuff. And, now sometimes I'll reach for guitar and the band is like sick. They're like, what are you doing? Like, why are you plugging that in? We don't do that. I've had really prominent guitar players in my studio and like pointed to my amp area and they don't know where to plug in their guitar. They don't know how amps work. I mean, that is dramatically different. I think one of the biggest things I notice that kills me all the time is no one jams anymore. So like the ability to like play within the pocket of a song is like a lot of times gone. And I don't want to sound like I'm just complaining. I'm sounding negative, but these are the cons is, no one, it's a bunch of dudes who practice with a click track in their bedroom. And you're like, here are the drums, play to the drums. And they don't know what that means. They haven't rehearsed and practiced. I was fortunate to be sort of the last bastion of an era where people were like in the studio playing, miking stuff live, which I'm really grateful for. And it makes me kind of want it more than ever. But yeah, like I said, the good things are that everyone has access to all the best stuff. You could digitally be in the greatest rooms in the world and, have these awesome things. I think it makes stuff less special. But as far as the good things, and I'm sorry if I'm monopolizing the convo here, but as far as good things, I think what's cool, because of bands like Bring Me the Horizon and stuff, they're more cognitive of the fact that they have to compete with pop songs. So the production is, in terms of size, competing in a cool way. And they're using a lot more synthesizers and digital sort of, that kind of production and stuff, which I think makes stuff sound really modern and cool and gives rock bands a chance to compete with like a Drake song. So those are the things I've noticed in the last few years. Someone else.
I think you nailed that. That was beautifully articulated because I would echo the same thing. I think the one pro is obviously accessibility. Like it's easier to make music than ever. The problem with that is I feel like, and maybe this is just me being old because like you, Eric, I come from a different generation, but I've noticed, and especially being a mixer and having mixed for so many different people, I feel like the bar has substantially gone down in terms of like people's knowledge about what they're doing. Like I can't tell you how many times I get stuff where it's like somebody pays a producer, say $8,000 and they can't even gain structure a microphone correctly. And I call the artist and I'm like, hey, there's no hiss on all these tracks. And they're like, oh, I whispered into a 7B on a couch with no pop filter and I ate the mic. And the dude had his mic turned up all the way to, and I'm just like, you turn the pad off? Like, what's that? It's just like, that's the stuff that I find really frustrating because that old school model kind of went away. The information is out there, but I feel like people now are so used to just scrolling and getting instant dopamine that if they don't get the instant, it's like YouTube. When I used to do YouTube, it pisses me off because I want to do serious education. But what gets clicks is the one secret the pros use, and you click on it, and it's like some bullshit generic. Can I swear?
Bypass filter.
Yeah, it's just like so. It's entertainment. It's not actually education. So that I think is something that has kind of fallen by the wayside. So the people that care are insanely incredible at what they do still, and then there's kind of like the rest of the room. You know what I mean? And it's like from the educational point of view, I want everybody to just put more effort into their craft and care more about it. But I don't know, like I'm passionate about it.
If I may, I have one more other point that I just thought of that is another thing. It's always on my mind. I feel like I'm a big fan. Like I love studying producers and I'm a big fan of like sort of the lineage and the family trees of the albums I love. And I always read stories about like Eric Valentine and all these. And I feel like back then you only had, it's like you had to make it work. So you hired a producer and you were allowed to be a little heated and push the band more and like really get these, really bend kind of what they're used to and make them uncomfortable to get the best performances without the fear they're going to just go to another guy who charges less because like they paid the guy and Eric Valentine's your guy. And so what if he yells at you and says you suck at drums? Like you're just going to play drums better. Now, if I kind of am a little harsh on an artist because I want to bring the best out of them, I'm fired and they go to another guy. And it's like, so no one is in that position anymore to like just hunker down in a room and no matter what, make the best art. And I always feel the best art comes from sometimes heated moments and controversies in the studio and differing opinions and fights. And that's how you get, speaking of the Metallica Blackout, that's how that happens is Bob Rock telling fucking Kirk Hammett he sucks on guitar for a long time. And then he shreds. And I couldn't do that now. If I said a guitar player like, I don't like what you're doing, they're crying and leaving.
Yeah, that's encouraging. And I honestly want to work with producers that push artists to their highest potential. Those are the people I want to pay and I want behind the tracks. I don't know. A couple things come to mind. Like, I just feel like stuff is, from a label perspective, a little bit too rushed sometimes. Like nowadays, albums aren't made with like time that's blocked out. Like there's like very few artists block out like, okay, this is a month or 2 months in our schedule. We're just going to hunker down, not talk to anybody and just make 12, 15 songs. And I don't know, there's a couple things that get lost with that because I love watching documentaries and I go back and I always consume that kind of stuff. Like I remember watching a Slipknot documentary one time and there was a story about, forget the producer's name, but the producer for the Iowa record told Corey to go run around the
Ross
building.
Robinson?
Like, I think it is. Yeah. He told Corey to go run around the building like 5 times and then they went in and tracked a song and it just gave so much more emotion and so much more of that, you know, visceral effect to his vocals that it just feels so much more raw and impactful. I don't know. I think I'm all for technology. I think it's really brought music to a great place and things have progressed by leaps and bounds and stuff. But I'm huge on like raw emotions in music and whether that comes from the vocals or just really nasty analog distortion and stuff like that too. Like I feel like some of that is missing sometimes, but all this is subjective too. Like I think you have to put it in perspective of, are you making a pop album or are you like a really weird niche thing that's coming back right now is MySpace deathcore revival bands, and like that stuff is clipping to the max and like terrible mixes and stuff like that, but it's awesome. And I think that was what really made that time special and it's coming back now. So everything's a little bit different, but yeah, I wish artists wouldn't rush things so much sometimes. And sessions are so scattered now, you know, like you'll do a record over this span of like 6 months, but it's with 4 different producers or something like that, you know, harder to make things cohesive and all work together. But yeah, and trends. I don't want artists chasing trends. I think that's a big thing for me too.
Yeah, that's an interesting comment because sometimes I feel like, even like on the mix side, and maybe you can relate, Eric. Sometimes I feel like when I mix a song, I don't want any band I've ever mixed to sound like any other band I've mixed. But obviously, we all have a style, right? And then there's like, well, we have to fit something in a certain box because it's going to Octane, but let's do something a little different, but we don't want to take too many risks. And it's always this battle. I mean, technically the producer should be working with the band to create the sound, but I always like to push. I mean, James, for example, this is one thing I really respect about the Daedric record is like, those guys are just beaten to their own drum and they wanted to make a really artistic record. And there was like no preconceptions. Every song was different. And I mean, there are songs that are like almost 100% real drums on there. And there are songs that are like programmed, you know, it doesn't matter. What matters is they made an artistic record. I wish more artists would do that. And I wish there was like a less pressure just in general, because again, everybody wants, you know, they're all chasing metrics. They're all chasing data. They're all chasing. I wish there was more effort put into like, let's make something really unique, because again, that's the difference between good art that does well and great art that we're talking about 30 years later from now is, you know, something comes out like when, you know, like, I'll give you an example. Like, remember when Paramore came out and like that snare drum that Ben Death and his team came up with, like that changed the sound of snare mixes for a decade after that. Cause everybody's like, oh, that's sick. How do we get that sound? And like, people aren't doing that anymore. It's like, I feel like we play it too safe. And there's also a lot of pressure to play it safe. And I just wish that people would embrace more artistic decisions, and hopefully AI will actually, which may sound counterintuitive, but I hope AI will actually kind of fix the industry in that regards. Like, you know, getting like a certain baseline will be, anybody can do it, but to make something special really requires, you know, like the effort
Yeah.
and like the real artists will come to the top of that and thrive. I hope.
I was
I do
waiting for
think-
someone to bring up AI. I was waiting for
Yeah.
it, dude. It was bound to happen. I think it's a great tool to start ideas and start songs, but I think we all have similar opinions on finalizing songs with AI and whatnot. But I think it's a great tool. I think it could be a great tool.
But people lean more
Definitely-
into like the human side, you know, like
It definitely makes people who don't understand song structure and stuff, like it's kind of a tutorial on songwriting. Well, I've seen tremendous growth in some of my clients who have been kind of using it as far as their understanding of like note choice and sort of leading tones and things. It's like, oh, I'm sometimes blown away by these choruses they come up with. Because prior, I'm like, you would never have thought of that, you know. So it does. It is a great tool. Also, Joel, I find that like bands like, maybe this is a label, but bands like the idea of being cutting edge more than they actually do like being cutting edge. Because I've had so many chats. I feel like I have the preliminary talk with every band and we always hang up and they're like, I want to be all these styles and I don't want to sound like anyone else. And then you're like, great, that's amazing. I'm so in. And then they slowly get uncomfortable and they whittle it down. And then by the end, they just send you like a Zach Cervini mix and they go, make it this. And then you go, but everything we talked about is, you know, and it's like, and maybe some of that's the label too. The label saying, you know, like, because I've had the instance a few times where we fired off something to a label and me and the band are stoked on it. And then the label's like, this sounds too different. And this is not going to go with on Octane. And then we have to kind of destroy it slowly.
Well,
I
that
think
would
there's a
never be
certain
our
standard.
response.
Yeah, no, I don't think I've ever said it quite to that. There's obviously a certain standard of like, I don't know, loudness meters and all that stuff that go into a proper master and a mix and whatnot. I think it all comes down to just everything being a little subjective. You know, it's just what's proper for that project. Every artist is different. So to me, that's what it all comes down to.
Well, that's good.
I also think that, you know, really pushing boundaries a lot of times doesn't have the immediate feedback loop that they actually want. You have to be willing to kind of stand out there and do something different when everybody isn't just jumping on. And then it sometimes takes, you know, a couple of years for some records to kind of be these like slow burners. And all of a sudden people are like, this was way ahead of its time. This is like so unique. But I think people want quick feedback. So they just want to do what's going to be popular right now. And they get stuck in that cycle versus really making a state.
Yeah, it's like a risk reward thing, you know, because it's like for every generation, for example, you might have like, remember when Skrillex came out? It was so out of left field unless you were like a hardcore underground dubstep nerd. But for the rest of us in the more mainstream, like when that came out, it was so different. And for every one of those, you know, there's 100 more artists that are successful that kind of fit in, you know, it's like 3 Days Grace and Nickelback and Breaking Benjamin. And they were all active rock bands. All of them sounded different, but they could all tour together. And then like, you know, they're like System of a Down would be like the totally out of left field, or Sleep Token for now. I guess I'm going back 2 decades, but like, you know, like Sleep Token is kind of the off the wall band right now that's totally different. And I think people are always looking for different, but there's a certain amount of risk that's associated with being like a true artist and like just kind of going in your own lane. And either it hits or it doesn't. And if it hits huge, everybody chases it. And if it doesn't hit, well, we know what that looks like too. So, you know, I think there's like an asymmetric risk reward payoff there. And I can see how that scares a lot of artists because I feel like I have this conversation, as I'm sure you guys do almost weekly with the people that I work with.
Yeah. I think the pioneers need to stand alone for a little bit to make a long lasting impact. And honestly, that's what I spend a lot of my time looking for. And that's the stuff that gets me excited the most is who's doing something that's not being done right now. Maybe not exactly, but in a more tasteful way, just something that's a little bit different. And I don't know, when it's done right, you might get some heat for it in the beginning and some people might not understand it right away. But I think eventually good music always, you know, gravitates towards people, whether it takes 5 years or even a week to come back to a song and then you truly love it. But yeah, I'm all for that stuff. That's the kind of stuff that gets me excited.
You brought up AI. Are there any specific AI tools that any of you have found useful that you wouldn't mind sharing or talking about how you approach or think about it?
I got a fucking awesome one. Okay, I'll just go real quick. Jammable is this awesome website I discovered, and I profiled my own voice on it. I like uploaded my YouTube videos. So when I do top lines now, if I'm like at home, I'll like hum a top line in my phone, and then I can put it in this, and it'll generate a version of me singing it full voice as my own voice. And then I put that into a demo and I can send it off. And it looks like I just like was having this gut wrenching emotional performance, but it was just me like humming in my phone.
That's cool.
Yeah, that's awesome.
I've used it a lot in like a corporate sense. So for example, like SEO arbitrage and like, training a bot on our stuff. So a customer can, a user subscriber to our audio stuff can come in and like find the information or the answers to the question. Like, how do I get my guitar to sound sick? And then it just like, oh, well, this and this and this and tab stamp here and here. And so we've used a lot of like AI tools and arbitrage like that. I mean, obviously I love ChatGPT for refining communication sometimes when you're, I'll call it passionate on something and it's not going your way. And it can kind of take the edge off your communication style a little bit. And, I think it's really good, especially because I feel like most producers and audio people, like we don't really get out very much and not all of them have people skills. So, coming in like internet passive aggressive to like a more corporate setting, it usually is a recipe for disaster. So I think AI is good for kind of like bringing your communication under control or, assisting you a little bit, like Grammarly, for example.
Sure.
Not that Grammarly is really AI, but in terms of like actual using it in production or like mixing, and there's some automated mixing tools, and I've done a bunch of courses and things like that on them, but they have so far to go. And as somebody who actually makes software, like we're a bit off from, I mean, I know there's a lot of VC people out there going and raising capital and saying AI in 2 years, everybody loses their job and it's the end of the world. Obviously that sounds great when you're raising capital, saying you've got the best thing, but reality is I feel like things might be moving a little bit slower. But that's one of the reasons I also want analog in my mixing is I wanted to make a more identifiable sound, because if I'm like, all right, well, if people want to start auto mixing their stuff in 5 years and, if they want to go get like a solid C or a C minus and they're cool with that, I want to be totally different and have a sound that's as hard as possible for anything or anyone to replicate.
Yeah. And your analog stuff sounds amazing.
Well, thank you.
What about, production quality and you guys, Joel and Eric, in the studio mixing, and Nico, as you're listening to what's coming in? You think about how much work, how expensive the gear, how much, artists or labels are paying for mixes. And then you have people that when it comes out might be listening on their phone and on crappy speaker, and they are happy with it. So you've got that extreme to what you're listening to in the studio. But how important do you feel it is that even if some large percentage of the audience is listening on suboptimal conditions or speakers or headphones, how much of a difference do you think it makes to go after that level of top quality in where that might come out in opportunities for editorial and playlisting things, but sync placements, in making an impression on a label, like when you're getting demos, Nico, but just, yeah, really, I want to kind of get a conversation about production quality, and how you guys think about it in some of those terms.
I feel like you're setting us up to be very negative. Everything is like we're hating on everything. You can go ahead, Joel.
Oh man, I'm about to go off. So I wanted you guys to talk first. Okay. I'll try to be concise, and I don't want to dominate the floor. So, okay. So first off, it matters. Even when I'm scrolling, my favorite test is it's New Music Friday vocal test. And James, I have a trained ear, but I can even go and scroll and I can tell who's mixing in a computer and who's using gear, because I can hear a difference on my cell phone and the way things hit and the impact. But more importantly, like I think there's an emotional component, and I know a guy in like Finland or Sweden or something like that who's doing a test on this. One thing that's interesting to me is people never talk about how sonics affect emotional impact, because it's a hard thing to prove. But I'll explain it to you with a story, because I think that's probably the best way to communicate it without getting nerdy and blowing you guys away who aren't like tech nerds like Eric and I, who live and die by that sword. I had a thing I mastered for this really incredible Russian female piano player once, and it's just her singing on a piano. And I did a master and I sent it to her, and she, she mixes and stuff. She's like, no, I think it's too saturated. I'm like, okay, which is like an audio term for like, I don't know, it doesn't matter. And I'm like, okay, so I replicated it in the computer and I sent it back to her. And I'm like, I want you to close your eyes, forget saturated and all these bullshit audio terms. Close your eyes and tell me which one you connect with more and you feel. And she comes back, she's like, the first one, hands down. I'm like, because here's what I hear. When I listen to the second or the first one, like coming through my speakers, if I close my eyes, I feel like I am sitting at the edge of your piano. I am listening to you. Your voice is in my head. It sounds to me like I'm sitting next to you and I can feel it. And it raises I don't even know what the hell you're saying, but it raises the hairs on my arm and it gives me chills and an emotional reaction, because it's such an incredible performance. And whatever the hell, it's in Russian, and my Russian's not good enough to translate. But, I like, when I listen to that, I feel like I'm in the room with you and it's sitting right next to you on the piano, and it moves me emotionally. When I listen to the second version, I feel like I'm listening to a recording of that. It's kind of like when I go to a mountain and, you know, like the Caucasian mountains and like Georgia, the country, not the, you know, not the state for people that are Americans. There is an actual country of Georgia, and it's beautiful. And you're standing at the top of a mountain, and maybe if you guys have ever done this, you're sitting there, you're like, holy shit, you're taking it in. And then you take a picture to put it on your Instagram and it just flattens it. That to me is the difference. So I spent 4 months of my life going down that rabbit hole, studying sonics and like trying to figure out, you know, like software, hardware, emotional connection and stuff like that, you know, and obviously test for cognitive biases and blah, 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 blah. I feel like sonics do matter, because if the sonics are good, even on a cell phone, it will increase the emotional impact of the message of the song. And that's ultimately what you're doing as a mixer. It doesn't matter how you EQ or compress or any of the technical shit. Like any guy like Eric or myself who does this for a living, we can all do it. And we know every trick that you've ever heard of. But the way that you interpret the song, the way that you make it feel, the way that supports that vocal and it translates that, if you can give somebody that, you know, where the arm hair, you know, where they get like the shivers, that's when you've done your job as a mixer. And that's ultimately what we are trying to do. So I think the sonics do matter, because when framed and done correctly, and the sonics are there, even on small shit systems like this, you'll be able to tell the difference. Now, obviously, like my mom is not going to notice the difference as much as somebody like myself or you guys who listens to music all day and analyzes it, but you can feel it. Cause like when I talk to my friend and he's like the mechanic in his car garage, I'm almost done, sorry, says to me, dude, how come everything on the radio sounds like shit these days? It just doesn't hit like the old mixes. Like when a guy who fixes like car engines notices that and doesn't know shit about production and says a comment, and I hear something like that in the wild, I'm like, I'm right. So anyways, your guys' turn. I'll shut up.
I feel like, to expound on that a little bit, we're almost having two conversations, which I like. I feel like when you talk about sonics, there's the implication that you mean fidelity often. And like Joel's kind of saying, the idiosyncrasies to me is kind of where the magic lives often. I don't necessarily, personally, to bring it back to your question, I'm not sitting there trying to capitalize on the best sonic performance on every device that exists. I just want to have like interesting emotional music that I feel will generally, as long as you reach some sort of professional threshold, should relatively translate and kind of just make everyone feel emotional. I feel like the people who care, the audiophiles, will listen on great speakers. And the people who don't care and probably aren't even affected by that to that some degree will listen on phones. Personally, anecdotally speaking, like my girlfriend's a great example, because I always play stuff for her because she does not care about music at all. For her, music is background noise to talk over. And I feel like there's a bunch of people in the population that feel like that. And there's people like us who love music, and we're going to have good speakers. So for me, it's a bit of a rabbit hole to cater to people who aren't going to care anyway and have that be something I'm mixing for. I'm trying to imagine someone who's really going to be emotionally touched by the song, and of a young version of me, you know, sitting there and hearing, you know, some crazy record for the first time and have my mind blown. Like, so that's how I think about that. I don't necessarily obsess over every device. I'll check on things, but I feel like an emotional mix translates generally, unless you just have completely missed the mark. I'm a big fan. Like for me, Rich Costy's like top 3 greatest mixes of all time. His stuff from a technical, I mean, it's obliterated. It is just like fuzz. There's even that story about Rich Costy, like when he was mixing Foo Fighters, Dave Grohl came in and didn't like the meters, like were all pinned. So the next day, Rich Costy taped over all the meters and drew in like a meter, like a thing not being pinned. And so that's how I like to mix anyway. So I'm never after like the cleanest, most, you know, amazing high fidelity version of a song. I just want it to sound emotionally impactful. So does that answer? I don't know. I don't know if it answers it, but.
No, I love getting to different perspectives. And Nico, from a label perspective, how do you think about that?
I always try to put myself in the fans' shoes, because I think not enough label people or bands in general give the fans enough credit, because like at the end of the day, they're driving the success of what's happening. They're the ones that are going to be listening to the music and going to shows and buying merch and all that stuff. I just think you can't really forget about how they're going to react to you not being, I think it goes back to genuine and authenticity and stuff like that. And I'm trying, like, obviously not in the studio and all that stuff. Like they're not thinking about the behind the scenes and what's happening in that realm. But I just think consuming it for the first time, like if they're not getting that emotional reaction, Joel, you mentioned goosebumps. Like I don't think if they're getting the initial goosebumps from a track, they're not going to be as inclined to come back and listen to it. And you know, when I'm getting mixes, and I do a lot of blind test mixes when I'm sharing it with bands and managers for the first time and all that, and like I'll just A, B, C, D them if we get 4 of them in, you know, and I think a lot of the times it's funny because most of the time the the most expensive mix isn't the one that's picked. And I think that's really interesting because I think sometimes, I don't know whether it's certain gear that's used or just a different approach to a song that's being taken in the mixing phase. I just think that is what elicits the emotion out of not only the fans. Fans haven't even heard it yet. It's the band, the one that's writing and creating the song. How is that going to translate when it's finally out to the world and everybody's listening to it, whether it be on their phone or in the car speakers? I listen to CDs all the time still, so I know those mixes are a lot different too, and we're getting alternative mixes for radio, and sometimes there's sync and instrumental ones and all that too. I don't know. Yeah, it just all comes back to the emotions and how it's being perceived the first time they listen to it without getting all too technical and all that stuff in the studio.
So I want to pull on two more directions from budget, from the low end to kind of higher end of budget, and specifically, and I'm sure you've all encountered these artists on both ends of this spectrum. We have had artists reach out that want to, work with us, or we hear something and like, man, they're such a great songwriter, but the production is just so far off, but they don't want to invest in the production, to spend the money to go in and work with somebody to really take it where it needs to go. So I think there are artists that might be listening here now, or when this airs anywhere in the future. I have seen so many artists that I think are talented that just aren't willing to invest deeper in themselves into spending money on production. But I think that could be, one of the limiting factors in where their music could go. So that's on one side. And then on the other side, there is the guys that just guys or labels, artists that are throwing insane money at the highest end production that may not be worth, and Nico, I don't know, you mentioned getting multiple mixes. I don't know to what extent you go, but I know we have a story from FiXT history. Clayton Celldweller, back in the debut album in 2003, they had the same song mixed by Ben Gross, Scott Humphrey, like some big LA mixers. And these were like 5-figure mixes per mix at the time is what those guys were charging. And they did multiple just to throw multiple in the trash and pick one. And it was like, man, that's a lot of money to be spending. So again, I've kind of thrown a few different ends of the spectrum, but for the artists that need pushed, invest into production and spending some money on it, to the guys that are maybe throwing way too much at it, I'm kind of curious where you guys might take those sides of the coin.
As someone who loves sports, I've learned that talent isn't enough. It's like you need to also have a passion and spend time investing in yourself and be diligent with a work ethic. So I'm not as blown away by raw talent all the time if they don't have the desire to invest in themselves, because it's like, okay, that's cool, but it's going to go nowhere. I find that with singers a lot. There's a million great singers and they're often, sometimes they just are doing nothing because they don't want to put the time in and write great songs and do all the other stuff. Just being naturally gifted at something is not enough. And it's also not enough just for me, to invest my time into it if someone's not going to invest. To me, that's indicative of the fact that they're probably not going to invest as much as I will be investing in it, just with my time and everything. So I always say to artists who don't want to spend money, it's like you're building a business. If it was anything, if you opened a Pizza Hut, you have to take out a loan, you have to buy gear, you have to buy a kitchen. That's all that's the equivalent of that. You can open an LLC and get a business loan pretty easily for for what a modest record costs nowadays. To drum up, to me, 10 to 15 grand for something that's your livelihood split amongst 5 guys who are working hard isn't that crazy. And if you can't even do that, to me, it's like, well, it just shows the lack of kind of passion for, desire to pursue greatness, which I don't really care about. The other way, that can get you far. I've seen people that don't have much talent spend a fuck ton of money and, there's a ceiling on it. But, I'd kind of rather, if I have the two options, I feel like if I'm latching onto one wagon, I would go with the guy who's shown that he can invest and actually do all the other stuff than a talented guy who's just going to have a bunch of songs sitting in his hard drive. Anyway,
that's a really great point because, when it comes to just mixes, for example, there's definitely a premium you pay pay for certain names where it's like, you know, this person's had X amount of hits this year and this and that. So, you know, they're going to charge 3 times more. That doesn't necessarily mean their mixes are better or worse than, you know, pick any other 5 people on their level. But, you know, there's definitely like a hype factor, like, oh, we want this person's name out. Like I've had so many different mastering engineers over the years, and, you know, sometimes they get picked by the name. And usually those are the times where I'm like really disappointed versus the person I would have used who maybe is pretty big, but not the, you know, apex or whatever this month or this year or whatever. So, you know, that's one spectrum. So can you get good mixes and good production affordably? Absolutely. You might have to look a lot harder. Whereas after a certain tier of price, you're going to get people who are really, really great at what they do. And then there's that next tier up where you're really just paying for a person's name and hype points at that. And if you want that, if you think it's going to help your career. So, you know, there's different people with different budgets. Just like, for example, we could talk about cars or watches or whatever. I guess more people can probably relate to cars. So, you know, you can drive across the country in a Honda Civic, or maybe you want to be in like a BMW. And then there's people that want to be in a Ferrari. And it's kind of just like all of them are a car. All of them get you across the country, and you might want better gas mileage, or you might want to hit 200 miles an hour on the freeway and, you know, be able to do that. So I guess, you know, there's different price points and tiers and things like that. So I think that's worth considering, being that you can do a lot on a little if you're really diligent. Or you can just tap into something you know that's going to work and pay more. Or you can go ultra premium, not necessarily, like I said, in terms of sonics, but that comes with like the hype and the clout and stuff like that. So, you know, there's different tiers and different prices. It's kind of the way I look at it. But yeah, like an artist, if you're not willing to invest in yourself, like what are you doing? Because like if you start any, like you said, if I open a McDonald's, like, oh, okay, dude, we're not going to buy fryers. Okay, well, how are you going to make fries? Customer 6 just ordered an extra large. You're like, well, I guess I'm going to go outside and put oil in a pot, and you know what I mean? Like you need to invest into the business. Any other business on earth has to invest back in itself to succeed or thrive or grow. What makes artists think that they're exempt from that just because we're talking about art and not commerce? So I understand why artists don't like that, because it involves money and they hate that, the M word.
Yeah. And I think to that point, relating it to music and being in a band and all that stuff, you have to ask yourself, and I do too as an A&R when I'm looking at artists and having all these conversations, 2-hour, 3-hour long conversations sometimes before even sending an offer out. And the process of getting to know an artist and who you're potentially going to be working with is, are they treating this like a hobby or is it a career? Do they see it as something they can do 25, 30 years from now? Or do they just like jamming out with their friends and putting music online and getting a reaction from it, you know? So that's a big part of it. And another thing for me when I'm looking to sign an artist, and what really grabs me first is just the songwriting in general. Just what knowledge do they have of composing a song, and does it have a great structure? Does it flow well? Does the chorus hit really hard? You know, if we're talking more specifically like the rock and metal lane that I deal with a lot, you know, does it have that emotional impact too? Because the production can come, you know, like that's my job, is to form a budget and work with lovely people like yourselves, you know, to try to get great songs together. So I'm more looking at like what's the raw talent of songwriting, vocal ability, instrumentation, all that stuff. Like we can get down to the other stuff later and really refine the production and that level of bigger mixing and bigger mastering engineers and stuff too. So it really just comes down to the actual song production thing, or songwriting side of things. But I don't know, maybe on the flip side of it too, maybe I just don't have enough experience yet, because I've never been in a position where I'm just paying for a name, you know, like to mix a song or anything like that. Maybe one point we'll get there with some of our artists that we're working with. But, you know, right now I feel like we're in a pretty healthy spot where a lot of guys tend to charge. I don't know how much you guys charge. What is it, like 1,500, 2,000 to mix? That's what I'm used to paying. You know, that's like why I get a lot of mixes back like that. But I don't know. It's just I don't ever want to be in a position where I'm just paying for a name to pay for a name. And I think you can do that at a certain level in your career, but starting out first, second record, let's just find somebody who fits with your sound and understands the vision and all that stuff and really gets what you're going for. I'm curious though, I have a question for you guys. you tend to pay for test mixes, or is it kind of just an on spec thing when you're trying to get involved with a new artist that you haven't worked with before?
You asking if we get paid for test mixes?
Yeah. Do you charge for test mixes? Yeah, you guys. Yeah.
It depends on the opportunity. I mean, if it's something I'm super passionate about and just the chance of it would be amazing for me and I really believe in it, then no. If I just get hit up randomly and it's someone who just wants me to do a test mix out of 10 people, then yeah, it just sort of it's very situational for me, and it kind of depends on my level of passion, I think.
I'm kind of the same. I mean, generally I try to find reasons to say yes and not be difficult, but at the same time, you don't want to waste your time, because you spend a day or even a day and a half like mixing a song, and there's like 8 other people in it, and the band is like, it's their first record, or maybe they're not even signed, right? And it's a waste of time, where it's like, hey, I've got fill in the name of whatever multi-platinum band, blah, blah, blah. We're doing test mixes. We got like, you're like, hell yeah, get me on that. Let's go. So, you know what I mean? It also depends on your relationship too, with like the label and the A&R. It's like, are you working with them? Are they sending stuff to you, or are they just kicking around and trying to just throw darts at a board to see what hits? It just depends on the opportunity, but I generally say yes. If I have a small band, like that's not signed and they want to come in, and I don't want people to dine and dash, especially if it's like a local band, whatever, then I'm like, usually I'll make them pay like half the fee. And then like, so at least there's like a kill fee or whatever. If they're like, dude, this is way off base, I'm like, all right, well, it doesn't happen often, but it happens. And again, if you spend a day of your time and it's like, you could have made rate working on something good that, somebody who wants to pay you. So it's kind of like, it depends, but I always try to find reasons to say yes, or situations personally that allow me to say yes, so everything is always negotiable. Right. So, yeah.
I like to get a sense of also how realistic the opportunity is too. Cause the fact that it's not a meritocracy, and it's not, if it was more of that, and I thought if I just did my best mix ever, I could win it. And, then I would be more in. But sometimes it's just like not even who does the best mix. It's like, this guy's the cousin of that guy who knows it. And it's very political. True. Yeah, that also factors in for me. It's like even if I spend a whole day making the greatest mix of my life, it can still lose. So sometimes, I have that to consider.
Or you can even have the best mix, but I've literally had A&Rs be like, actually, we picked your mix and we want it, but we need this person's because you've got the wrong name for the radio and this person. But even though your mix is way better, we're going to go with that person's. And, like when that stuff happens to you, you're like, I'm glad I just wasted a day of my life on that. But yeah, cool. Maybe next time.
Interesting. Wow. Thanks. I've always just been so curious what the approach and mindset is to that kind of stuff. That's cool.
I mean, again, if you have the relationship with the mixer, nothing a phone call can't, you know what I mean? Like, hey, can you test on this? I'll be like, yeah, of course. But if you don't, and you're going in cold and like, you don't give proper context. I know some people who absolutely don't do tests, but I don't know. I think it's an opportunity missed, but I get it. If you're super, super busy and you're kicking out 10 songs a week, like you probably don't have time for that, but I don't know. Everybody else is different. I have definitely have friends who are mixers who are like, no test mixes. Or if you want it, it's going to be full rate. I mean, I've heard stories of like, on this record, we had 5 guys mix it. We paid them all full rate and they were all tests. And then we went with that guy. And I'm like, you guys spent $50,000 on mixes?
I know a bunch of bands who've done that. It's pretty insane. Yeah. I don't know how that's possible, but
major label.
I might not have a job. I might not have a job if I did that. So I got to be a little bit more concise,
Nico, for you, it's all free, dude. Don't worry about it.
Appreciate it, dude. Appreciate it.
Anytime you need something from us, you hit us up. We're good.
Yeah,
we'll let you know.
So I have lots more questions. I have a few more I definitely want to get to, but I want to remind everybody that's attending, if you have questions you want to ask, throw them in the Q&A or the chat, and hopefully that is working. I don't see any in there right now, but feel free to start dropping questions in so we can go into some Q&A here shortly. Joel and Eric, I've got a question for you, and then I'll follow up with one for you, Nico. What would you say in terms of independent artists coming directly to you versus labels? If you just had a ballpark, percentage, 50-50, 70-30, or somewhere in between, like, are you getting approached more directly from artists that are paying out of their pocket to work with you, or from labels?
For me, it's pretty half and half right now. There's kind of been an influx because of the internet and the sort of prevalence of influencers, of like these independent artists having gigantic budgets now. Like there's like YouTubers who, they're making $100,000 a month and they just like, I want to make an album. There's a lot of those, especially in LA, because that's like, this is where the hub of it is. So I get a bunch of like TikTok people and like, they have more money than, or just as much as labels sometimes. So I get those. But I would say right now it's split pretty evenly. I prefer sometimes to work with independent people, actually, because there's less sort of a machine involved and you get paid faster. Everything's faster. The communication's faster. There's not different boss levels of notes too. You know, the A&R guy always disagrees. They always want basically just turn the vocal up 150 dB all the time is always the note. And then the band's like, turn down the vocal, and then you don't have to deal with that as much and play middleman. So, but you know, that's individual. Some labels are fantastic. It just kind of depends.
I'm guilty of the vocal thing for sure. I'll say it
Always.
right now. But
So it's okay.
I could send an acapella and they'll say, turn the vocal up. Like that's how much they want vocals.
This is good, bro, but I still can't hear the vocals.
Yeah. I still hear music. Can you turn up vocal more?
That's like mix it for Christian rock radio. It's like, yeah, I can still hear the band. Like I need another 3 dB. Like we took it to the radio, you know. I'm like, to answer the question, James, I'm probably like 70-30, but I also mix over like 200 songs a year. So I do a lot of volume, and like, I don't like to say no. I like to say yes. So if I've got somebody who wants to work with me, and as long as like, I mean, I just try to find reasons to say yes and make it work. So, you know,
Was it 70-30?
Like independent artists.
Okay.
I
Interesting.
do a ton of label stuff, but again, it's just all over the place because label stuff, there's always politics involved. There's always like deadlines. Usually label stuff, at least in my experience, is always like, hey, it's Thursday and tomorrow we need this to go to distro. And by the way, you're mixing this. Can we, you know, not all of them. You guys have always
Please tell everybody that we don't do that too.
Yeah, you guys don't do that. I've been in too many situations like that. But I mean, indie artists do that too. So I don't know. It's all over the place. But songs are songs. You know what I mean? Like if you love mixing, you just want to work on as many as possible. So I try to I don't even care. I don't have a preference. I just love music, and that's what I want to do. So.
And Nico, my question to you is a little different. Do you find, like, are you ever working with artists that are self-producing, or artists that have taken it on themselves before they get to talking with you to work with somebody like a Joel or an Eric, where they're investing into their production? Or is it pretty consistent that when you're getting involved, you're needing to take them to somebody else to work on the?
Yes, that last part is correct. I would say 90% of the artists I'm looking at don't have any high level production to it at all. And I'm actually surprised by a lot of bands that are self-produced that have a baseline knowledge of at least getting some songs together. Maybe they'll pay a mixer, maybe they'll pay a mastering engineer. And I feel like I'm pretty good at telling the quality of that for sure. It's probably 90% of self-produced artists. But like I said, I'm not too worried about that because I know we can get it to a great place. It more just comes down to the songwriting aspect of things. But yeah, it is a pretty healthy amount of self-produced artists. But then on the flip side of it, that's why I think I said this before we actually started this thing officially, is like, it's so important I see it really important for me to form relationships and connections with producers, because I do have a few guys under my belt now they just say, look, dude, I'm going to send you everything that comes across my desk. And obviously those are unsigned artists. So that means that they have the capabilities of being a well-oiled machine, and they can sustain themselves without a label. So those are good signs that I know that they're just in it for the long run. When I get stuff from producers that don't have or from bands that don't have a label backing, but are going to producers that I've worked with and trusted before. So that's super important to me too.
Question for you, Nico. Sorry to steal your thing for a second, James, but do you like it? Because you just mentioned like producers sending you like unsigned bands. Do you like it like when people do that? Because again, the hard part for sometimes, you know, you work with an artist, you're like, this artist is really good, and they're looking for a home, but you're like, well, I don't know if I want to pitch you, because what if the A&R person doesn't like it? Now I look stupid or whatever. So what's your personal take on that? Because I'm always skittish to pitch people, but you know, you see good stuff all the time and some not good stuff, and there's always an ebb and flow to this stuff, but I always wonder about that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Look, I'll never judge, and I don't think anybody should ever feel stupid for sending me stuff. I listen to everything. We even have like a actual submission thing through our websites, and I seriously listen to everything. I'm not just saying that. Like I go through all the songs that are sent to me. Every time a producer sends me songs, I definitely consider it, especially if I've worked with the person and I trust them and I know their work and whatnot. But I will say I am super picky, so don't be discouraged if I say no. But I definitely listen to everything, and I will take it into consideration because I absolutely love that stuff. I would actually prefer that rather than burying my face in Spotify and TikTok for 10 hours straight trying to find something. Like, I honestly prefer when things get sent to me by trusted sources, for sure.
I've had Nico say no to me before already.
I have.
Yeah.
Wow. Calling me out, dude. Yeah, I'm picky, bro. I think we are. A Thriller as a label is picky too. So But I love
Yeah.
it. I encourage it for sure.
I'll piggyback on that and say, like Joel, and you just said trusted sources. Like, we get pitched stuff, and like if it was just some random person pitching me stuff, and we were like, this is like they just sent me 3 things in a row. I'm like, yeah, and now I'm like, okay, I'm never going to trust anything that person sends. But like, you have such a record, and we have such a relationship. Like, if you sent me anything and we weren't into it, like it wouldn't shine anything back on you, in my opinion. Like, you're a trusted source.
I always afraid to like send stuff that's like risky and not established. For me, I'm always like, all right, if I was a business owner and I was going to invest in this, right, like a label would, what boxes are we checking other than the song is really great or the artist has a good image, and are like, what are the metrics, what are the KPIs? Like, I'm always looking for stuff that's kind of like on its way up and could blow up, where it's like, hey, we're already at like 100K monthlies, this band needs some money behind them, they don't have a home, that's the stuff I look for. But obviously there's a lot more stuff that you see floating around where you're like, this could be really awesome with the right direction, but that also involves a lot of artist development and stuff like that. And some labels are into that, and some labels are like, hell no, you guys do that, and then when it works, bring it to us, and we just want to push the money button and see if we can 10x it. So
yeah,
interesting.
I was gonna say, I always look at rejection as just like it's not the right fit. You know what I mean? Even with mixes, like sometimes the greatest mixer on the planet isn't the best mixer for that person. I mean, some of my heroes, I love watching videos where like Jason Joshua talks about like how he gets fired all the time. Like that's like, to me, it's so awesome because it's like even at his level. So I don't look, if I pitch an artist for me and someone says no, to me that just means like it's not like it's shitty, it's just not the right thing for that label. And and that was the exact situation I was describing with Nico. It wasn't the right fit. This particular band signed another label and they're doing amazing. So they don't suck. It was just wasn't the right thing.
There's so much that goes into it. I mean, I feel like we could talk about that for 2 hours, or I could at least, but I highly encourage it. And I would always love if you guys sent stuff. Any producers out there. I think it's awesome.
Everyone spam Nico.
I'll listen because I'm just genuinely curious. Even if I kind of go into it and I'm like, this might not be the best thing, I just want to hear what it sounds like just out of curiosity. I think it's awesome.
So we're really wanting to gear some of the advice here for independent artists or even other independent labels. So I'm curious if there are anything from each of your perspectives that you might encourage an independent artist that is looking within your lane. If an independent artist is approaching you, and you've worked with lots as a mixer, this for Joel and Eric, when they're reaching out, a new artist that maybe hasn't done this before, I'm sure you get a lot of, I don't know if you guys have cheat sheets for a new client to be like, here's the process, here's how this is going to work, or what you see. But what's some just generally speaking advice that you might have for an independent artist that is going to work with a mixer or producer for the first time, or maybe not even the first time, but continuing to work with somebody?
I'll jump on that grenade. Okay, so I think the first thing is I would ask to get on the phone. And I know a lot of mixers don't like this. I'm friends with a lot of them from Nail the Mix. I know a lot of people don't like to do, I don't know, maybe I'm old school. I like to talk to all my artists and I want to be involved, and like I want to see if we're a good fit and we vibe and I understand them, and before I mix their song. But I'd like to try to talk to people. So I would want, if I was the artist, I'm thinking of like flipping, I would want to ask the mixer, be like, hey, can we talk about the project? Because you want to find a person who cares. To me, again, I'm being old school. Do they pick up the phone or not? And will they talk to you, or are they will they text you back? Or is it like, nah, bro, this is my manager. Have your manager talk to my manager and don't touch me. I'm so-and-so, because I've seen many people do that as well. And I guess it's not a con. They're busy. They need somebody to manage their schedules. Not everybody can do it, but I don't know. I like the personal touch. It's important for me. So I'd want to talk to that, especially if you're a newer artist, because obviously you can't afford that tier of mixer where you got to go through the manager's manager of the manager. So, but there, so I would want to talk to the artist or the mixer for sure, just to kind of like, the next thing would be feedback, meaning that like, especially if you're self-producing, I can't tell you how many times I call a band and I'm like, hey, guys, this is pretty rough. What you should do is this and this and this and that. Are you willing to re-record your guitars, or maybe re-sing this, or maybe like hire this editor I have in Spain for $75 to like tighten this up a little bit? We're going to get a much better product. And I find most bands are open to that sort of thing. And it's like, because I have to put my name on this too. And, I like the song, but we need to up the level here on the input, because and Eric, you can attest, like a good mixer can take a C to an A, an A plus, an A to an A plus, but you can't, an F to a C, but you can't take an F to an A+. You know what I mean? So you kind of need to control your inputs, and you want to do the best you can. So if a mixer calls you back and says, hey, maybe we should re-record this, or maybe you should go do this with a producer, like, don't get offended. They're actually trying to help you, and be happy that they care. And I think that stuff is important, because if you're open to feedback from people, you're going to improve. It's like when I used to produce, and I'm a guitar shredder. So I'd like whoop everyone's ass on guitar really hard. And I would have to stop them sometimes. Like, look, I'm so hard on you right now because I want you to be the best version of yourself. And I want to know that I know what I can get out of you and what you're capable of. You just haven't been taught properly. And like, so don't get mad, get excited, because the next time we get in this room together, you're going to be twice as good. And, then when they kind of see that like, hey, this person's actually, they're not being rude or like tough on me, but they're actually just trying to help me, because most people have never received any type of like formal training or education and stuff like that. So yeah, just be open to feedback. It's very important.
Yeah, I would say kind of the same thing. It's be open to collaboration. I always say, if you didn't want my opinions, why not just do what you were going to do anyway? Like, the whole point of hiring a producer is to have new inventive ideas that, and be a catalyst for things you would never have thought of in the first place. And be willing to let the song go where it tells you. Don't sort of hold on for dear life to these little moments because it's a cool riff you played that you thought of in high school. And it's like, sometimes that's not a cool part. I give a little spiel every time I meet with a band. And I also am a fan of the preliminary conversation. I always have to have that because it's so subjective. The stuff I love, sometimes people hate, and some people hate. So, I always kind of tell the artist that, like, I'm here for greatness. I also am not the kind of person where, like, studio for me, and this probably doesn't vibe with some people, but is not a hangout time. I don't like when bands come in and it's like they bring the beers and the boiler. Like, I'm here to do work and make great shit, and that's my goal. And we're going to get there by any means necessary. And if that's not something you're interested in, then I'm not the guy for you. I always, I'll say often too, like, I'm the kind of producer where you'll hate me during the process, but after you'll say, those are the best takes I've ever had in my life. Like, that's kind of my goal. Especially, I'm a singer myself, and I'm so hard on vocalists because I want greatness, and I want to make a legacy, and I want really great shit to be out there. And this kind of harkens back to what I was talking about earlier, is the lack of jamming has sort of made a generation of people that they're not used to hearing negative feedback. They're not used to vibing with a song. So I spent a lot of time like obsessing over pocket and being like, no, you're going to sing are you listening to the drums? Are you paying attention to the song at all? It just sounds like you're just singing notes, like, what does the song mean to you? And like, who are you thinking of when you're saying, like, these kind of questions that artists who self-produce never had anyone mention. They're so worried about the tone and these things that don't matter. And it's like the thing too, like, you never want the vocalist to sit while you're comping the vocals, because all their favorite shit is the worst. Those are the worst takes every time. Because they kind of like, they get rid of all the raw emotion. So I would say be open to that. Be open to the possibility that you might get, you're not going to get your way all the time. And the best results are a product of collaboration. Otherwise, you wouldn't be there in the first place. So I'd say that on the producing side. On the mixing side, it's just like exactly what Joel said. It's like, be willing to change stuff for the better of the song. And even tiny details, like, you just be organized and just have everything make sense. I have a little sheet I send out ahead of time, like a mixing requirements thing. And it'll say, like, just, label shit, number stuff, delete things you don't want in the song, because people don't realize too, like, I've mixed stuff before and deleted a bunch of noise and gotten yelled at. They're like, no, it's supposed to be gross. And so I don't automatically delete noises and stuff. Like, if you want me to edit your thing, like, you have to have that in there. I don't know that you don't want the guitar scratch. Some people love that. Some people want the coughs and stuff, So don't assume that mixer can read your mind. I've actually been going back and forth with a band recently, and it's like, they send me these notes, like, turn up Bill's guitar. I'm like, who's Bill? It doesn't say Bill's guitar on it. It just says 50s. Which one's Bill? So you have to, like, know, like, they're not in your head. And I don't know. That's all I can think of, really. And not to sound like I feel like this is so cathartic and I'm just hating, but it is also a lot of amazing stuff that comes from the process when you open yourself up to it. And it's not just me. I don't want to create this totalitarian image like I'm just yelling at people. Part of my job is to bring the most out of people who haven't otherwise had to do that. This also, to me, last point, is because everything's so on the internet now, a lot of the development of like getting an audience reaction happens live. Like, you get thrown to the wolves and you have to see someone's face and watch them be bored and then see, oh, when I sing this word that way, that guy looks up from his phone. And a lot of people haven't had that kind of experience. So they don't know that they're being boring. They haven't had to look at a room full of people hate them and go, oh shit, I got to really put something into it. And I did. So I know exactly what, I got I was on tour when I was young, and just for the first couple months, no one cared about what I had to sing. And then I started realizing like, oh, if I just change this or this inflection, and you realize the nuances matter, even though maybe people can't quantify them. Anyway, I digress. Carry on.
I want to get a question over to Nico as well for advice for artists working with a label and some of that process. But I want to zero in on something you mentioned about like file organization. How important is that, Joel and Eric, specifically back on your side, for when you're working with anybody on the recipient end, that their files are organized and what that sets up for your ability to work with them?
You take this, Joel.
I don't know if you guys like Bitcoin or not, but I just had like a Michael Saylor moment. Like before Michael Saylor destroys, he just goes and then he annihilates. But anyways, man, it's like the most important thing. I think the big, if there's one thing that wastes a mixer's time and pisses them off is not having your shit together. And like, you know, it's understandable if it's like a band's first time, you know what I mean? It's like going on your first date, you're nervous, you don't know what to say, maybe you make a fool out of yourself, whatever, it's okay. But it's like, what gets me is like the people that are like, they've been doing this for a long time and they can't like fucking edit their guitar, you know, like they can't make a crossfade properly. And I'm thinking about what their rate is in my head. And I'm like, I'm going to fly to LA. So I just like, it's the most important thing. Okay. And it's not hard to do. And if you do it correctly, it's just you want to start off on the right foot. I'll leave it there without getting emotional.
Cool.
There's two components to this. First of all, I have just a human bandwidth of inspiration that I can provide for a given song. And it's like, hey, is 100% of my full inspiration and passion. Do you want 50% of it to be dedicated to chopping out breaths, you know, or do you want me to sit and like going through like these different weird labels that don't make any sense and realizing there's like 12 hi-hats? It's like, or do you want to send it to me and I can just start and then you just get my first version of passion that just will unleash on your mix. And then I also like, I don't take it personally or anything, but there's an element of heartbreak associated with it because I start every mix prepared to give my all to this band. I go in, I'm going to give everything I got. We're going to do something together. We're going to build. And if they can't even take the time to label their tracks and color code stuff or whatever, I'm like, well, it just feels unfair because I'm putting in everything. And then I start to, you start to go, well, then I don't know. Do they care? And then it ends up being this sort of negative spiral. And when I get great labeled stuff, I'm so happy. I'm dancing around my room. The mix is awesome. It's so good. And it just affects everything all the way through. It sounds like a simple thing, but it is just, I don't know. I feel like I keep bringing up greatness, but to me, the obsession and pursuit of greatness involves sort of an understanding of minutia. And if you don't care to that sort of granular level, I just feel like, what are you doing? Anyway.
Look how traumatized we are by this question.
Yeah.
Like you can feel it.
Providing a service of therapy here. Well, Nico, from the label side, what's some advice you could give to artists that are pitching to labels, whether it's to Thriller or InVogue or other labels, or trying to become successful as an independent artist and working with other companies in the industry in terms of music production or interaction? Yeah, I'm kind of curious what your perspective is. And I know you focused on seeing the songwriting as kind of a core piece and then addressing production. But, are you getting, 128 MP3s that aren't labeled right? Yeah, I don't know if there's even some of the same issues, but like, how can a band put themselves forward the best when they're pitching to a label like you?
Yeah, I don't know. I think it is very important to invest where you can because I try not to be too opinionated when I'm listening to new bands that come in and stuff like that. I'm trying to just see it for like what's the potential of things, but I am going to take stuff a little bit more seriously when I know there's time and energy and sometimes money being put into these songs because like I mentioned earlier, that just means that this group of individuals and this artist is in it for the long run and they can see themselves doing this for a long time. And I don't know, outside of production stuff, like I just think it's important to know that when you potentially start working with a label, the hard work doesn't stop right there. I would say that's the time where you go full force and you have to go all in on it because now you have a team of individuals that are going to be helping you push your music. It's weird. I've had some instances, far in the past where like, we get to work with a really talented artist and there's a lot of potential there, but then things start to slack off and they just don't have that creative drive anymore because they think the job's done. I think everything is just going to work out for themselves. And I think prior to signing and after signing, you need to have that mentality, whether it be grinding local shows and trying to sell merch and connecting with producers and songwriters and booking agents and managers and all that stuff. If you're doing that on your own independently and you continue to carry that same energy with a label, you're going to have even more firepower and more people working towards that same goal. But then, bringing it back to production, I do think it's important to invest where you can, because I'm going to take those projects more seriously when I know there's time, energy, and money being invested in songs and in content and live shows and everything that involves it. Not just songs, but all aspects of being a band.
Well, I know we've got a couple questions in the Q&A, which we'll get to here in just a minute. And if there are more, please add them. But one more question for all three of you, and that is the mix feedback process. When, I think for Joel and Eric, you're sending the mixes, but Nico, you're getting mixes from guys like this that you have to weigh in with other stakeholders, the band, managers, whoever else might be involved in those conversations. But what makes for a good, or again, we could go on like, what are the negative things to avoid, or what are the positive things to focus on to make a mix feedback effective? And, I can see from working with mixes to artwork and graphic design feedback that there are people that are not used to getting critical feedback or how to provide it or voice it. So I'm curious how you guys think about that in terms of mix and production feedback.
My favorite notes are the kind of notes that have an emotional component to them. Like, I love notes that are like, this part's boring, this part needs more energy, a lot more than like hi-hat up 1 dB, because at the end of the day, that's less important. So I really admire an artist who gives me that kind of feedback, because they're usually right. It's like, wow, that part could have more energy, So, and also from a mixer perspective, like I always like getting notes, because it kind of means you entered the next phase. It means like it's good enough to give you notes. Sometimes if you don't get any notes, that's like, oh, it's not even like, I must have missed the mark so much that it's not even worth, going into the details. So when I get that first round of notes, part of me goes, oh, thank God, I actually made it through. And then, I'll do them all. Even to the detriment of the song sometimes, or a lot of times, but it's just how it goes. It's at the end of the day, it's their tune, and that's how I look at it.
I've got some rules. And back in the day, I used to ghost for Joey Sturgis when he was like the #1 metal guy. And we were doing like 40 plus songs a month. And because Joey was like, yes to everything. I was just like, we had to kind of figure out how to systematize a process to be able to handle high volume, high pressure, so we're knocking out label bands like Attila and all this awesome stuff. But then we're doing like small bands that are like, some local band from like Greece that just wants to work with Joey. So, we have to like provide a certain level of quality and responsiveness, and it has to be totally transparent. Like, you don't want the label band feeling like they're not getting the same, like, you're distracted or whatever and not working on their stuff, right? So in order to do that, we kind of had to systematize. Actually, it's funny, we made a course on this called Speed Mix, which is the best thing we've ever made at URM in terms of like quantity of sales and things like that. Like, a lot of producers have taken this, but in there, we teach some very important frameworks that you would create, like SOP, standard operating procedures. So first one is always one contact and notes over email with a checklist. Okay. And the reason for that is, like, for example, say James and Nico, you work together at the same label, and, Eric, you're the manager, and then there's the band. So you guys don't have a consensus on what you want, but then like, Eric hits me up. He sends me a text. He's like, bro, turn this and this and this up. And then Nico hears it. He's like, dude, what the hell did you do? Like, nah, bro, you got to turn this up. And then like the singer hits me up 20 minutes later, like, obviously as a mixer, that you're going to ruin it right there. Like, you can't take feedback. So you need the team to create a consensus, right? And then to bring it into you as a mixer and be like, here's what we're executing. Because then they've already argued about it. They've thought about it. They've gotten pissed off, and the drummer and the singer punch each other in the face, and then made up later and decided that the vocal goes up 2 dB and not the snare drum. So that stuff is important because the band needs to reach a consensus. Second, so that's the first one. Second, I think having, like I said, one primary contact and one email. Second, I want everything time stamped and concise, but as detailed as possible. What I mean is, like, do not write me a freaking essay about the intent of the part. Holy shit. I hate when I see a half a page and where it's like lead guitar up in the solo. Like, just get a little more. It's like, when I wrote this part, it's like, look, I don't care. Like, I do, but I don't. I don't want to hear it. What I want to hear is like what's not jiving in the mix, not like the intent. If you need to explain the intent because I don't understand, I will ask you for clarification, because sometimes, people aren't good at communicating their notes. But the more concise it's written out on a checklist, the easier it is to do that. Next, having a checklist, providing a checklist back from the mixer's point of view is super important, just as important as getting the notes. So the mixer validates with an X that you actually listened to the note and either did it, or here's the reason why I couldn't do it because I didn't understand it and no one picked up their phone or whatever. Or, hey, this part, I tried this, but this is and this and this and that problem happened. But that way, at least the artist, from the artist point of view, the mixer acknowledged your note. They're not just bullshitting you, because if they don't give you your notes back, and again, not everybody works like this. I'll give an example. When I mix for Cell Dweller, Clayton sends me a freaking video, which is actually the most badass thing. And he's like, at this section right here, can you blah, blah, blah. So I don't send him a checklist back because he's got like a 5-minute video where he's explaining everything in his DAW. But every other artist I work for, it's always a checklist, because then, like I said, I can check it off and say, hey, you told me to take the snare up at this, but I don't actually have that track. I think it's missing. Little asterisk. Can you guys investigate? And oh, you're right. It didn't get sent over in the stems. Let's get it over. So what I'm saying in a nutshell is creating a process that's duplicatable, that's repeatable, that's structured and standard. And then most importantly, communicating that to the band before you start working saves so much bullshit and so much stress on everybody's hat. And it's just being organized. It's respecting their time. It's them respecting your time. And if you don't systematize it, it can just, I've seen every situation you can imagine. It's fucking chaos. It's much better to have a very, very systematized approach to it. And again, sometimes you need to pick up the phone and break the rules, but more importantly, just having a pipeline of communication that everybody understands so no one breaks protocol, because the singer will call you because they're in a dispute with the guitar player and be like, bro, I need my version of this mix, blah, blah. And you're like, no, like, you can't just have your own version of it. Like, this is dangerous. Like, we don't want to piss off the A&R guy. Like, can we just agree on what we're going to do, please? So anyways, communication is very, very, very important.
Yep. And always include a rough mix.
Yes, always. That is insanely good advice. Even if your rough mix sucks ass, what's important is like your balances, right? Because I'll give you an example. I got fired once from a local band in Chicago, like 15 years ago. The dude sends me an all caps email. He's like, I can't believe you didn't turn up the guitar solo here. Like, what mixer, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, dude, it was labeled background guitar. There's a lead vocal there and there was no rough mix. And all he had to do was tell me to turn the damn thing up. But he was so pissed about it. I'll never forget the email he sent me. And I'm just like, dude, it's not even a guitar solo. It's literally behind a vocal, but it was supposed to be a guitar solo. And the vocal was supposed to be, how the fuck am I supposed to know that? Like, I can't read your mind. I'm not your mom. I'm not going to come change your diaper for you. Like, you got to tell me, like, and the rough mix tells me that, like, okay, I hear this loud ass synth here. Okay. That synth is supposed to be really loud. This is a moment. How do I make this sound better now as a mixer? But you're giving them, they know what they're going to expect. Or here's another one. I'm going to get myself in trouble, but I was doing a test mix for Scott Stapp. And Scott, one of the greatest, most iconic rock singers. And oh man, I Thrasher was producing, Eric, Kevin really well. And a good friend of mine. And like, man, I did my first mix and I sent it to Kevin. He's like, dude, this is so sick. We sent it to Scott and he's just like, dude, mix is awesome. Can you make it sound just like the demo? And I called Kevin. I'm like, dude, what the fuck just happened? Like, I'm like, oh man, I don't want to fall out here for Scott. So what had happened is Scott was listening to like the Kevin's like at the end of the tracking session printout mix of however he had it balanced for 6 months in his car every day. And then he heard it different. He wasn't used to hearing it. So I kind of had to figure out how to reconcile what he wanted. And again, having that rough mix saved my ass, because now that I knew what he was listening to, I'm like, okay, I'm not going to reamp the guitars. I'm going to go back to this type of chain that Kevin used. And I'm not going to try to tweak this too much. And I'm going to, keep it more in that vision. And then the next mix I sent him, he was like, nailed it. And I was like, thank God. So you know what I mean? That's why you have a rough mix. It's so important.
And from an A&R perspective, how does this play out on your end, Nico?
Vocals up. That's it.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
He just sends that as an auto reply.
Yeah, just vocals up. No, but I mean, I do think that's important, but it's always case by case thing. My job, honestly, is just streamlining communication, because when we're going into the mix note process, sometimes I've seen it being bust out in the second version. Sometimes it takes 7 or 8 versions, which seems like a lot to me, but sometimes that's what it takes to get a song there. But when we're going through that process, my biggest thing is time is valuable, and I don't want to waste anybody's time who's working on this project. I want to pay efficiently. I want to get songs done efficiently, and I just want to make sure we're not missing any deadlines for releases and stuff like that. So I've had situations where I'm the one that gets the notes from the band and I send it off to the mixing engineer, and vice versa. They come back to me and I send it to the band. Sometimes it goes through the manager. Sometimes there's artists that I have a level of trust with who maybe have some knowledge with production and have mixed some other bands and stuff before that can communicate right with the mixing engineers and the producers and whatnot. But yeah, it's all a case by case thing. I've even had certain situations where I don't know, people have almost pulled out before because the wrong terminology was being used. Like, I think, Eric, you mentioned that when you first started talking about this. Like, I'm curious, so I can maybe learn something here too. Are there even keywords that you, Joel and Eric, look for in mixing stuff? Like is saturation or brightness and darkness, like words that you guys like to hear?
Yeah, there's
Go ahead, sorry.
No, I say there's definitely commonalities. So go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, part of the job is being a translator and learning what people mean and not actually what they're saying, which is part of the producer gig too. I've gotten feedback before. I mean, like I mentioned, I like when they appreciate that the emotional part of the song is the most important. Not to say I don't like the occasional technical note, but I've gone the other direction where I've gotten a note that says like the mix sounds too red, needs to be more blue. And it's like, you have to learn like, oh, they kind of mean like maybe they want a little more compressed. So you get an element of that. And I don't blame people because it's not their job to know compression, saturation, fast attack, so that's kind of okay with me. I think one thing, kind of touching on the other point, is like what bands can do and stuff. The most valuable thing to me is having a strong point of view and being able to delineate your thoughts. The worst thing in the world is when an artist or a band goes, I don't know. Like, I hate those people. I want someone who goes, I want to do this. This is how I want it to sound. I want the drums this way. Those are the best notes. And you're all working towards the same goal. I get so frustrated. Joel probably gets this too. You get the notes. They go, can you turn this up? I just want to try. We all just want to try it. We all just want to try what it's like if you cut the bridge in half. And I'm like, I'm mixing your song. We're not trying. So like, what do you want? What was the goal of the part? So the best artists I've ever worked with have a very strong, unwavering point of view. And they go, this is how it's supposed to be.
How often do you guys you're in the mix process and somebody doesn't understand this is the mix process, but wants to take it all the way back to rearranging, rewriting,
Constantly.
Are you trying to trigger us? Or
I've seen it.
It happens all the time. Again, I think everything is upfront communication. So sometimes just calling the band. Again, this is the kind of thing I would usually talk to, but explaining to an artist what mixing is and what it isn't. So for example, sometimes I get these quote requests that come in the email and somebody will be like, yeah, so how much for you to mix, master, edit, comp vocals? I'm like, all right, let's break this down. So first off, I'm a mixer. I could edit for you, but it's going to cost a lot of freaking money. So much money, I think you're going to shed a tear of blood when you look at it. So I have an editor who's amazing. I've got like 3 of them, and they work with all these great producers, and they're like $85 a song, and they'll have it done by the time we get off this email thread, so it's like, hire that person. Don't ask me to edit. I'm not an editor. Next, I'm not the producer on the track. You're not paying me 3 points and half your publishing because I didn't write half the song. So I kind of I'm happy to, throw some stuff on it, but don't be like, hey, can you write a bunch of post-production for this? Well, I can, but it's going to cost a little bit more than my mixing quote. Next. So you know what I mean? Like, you just got to explain these rules to people. Like mixing and mastering, I know some people like to do it, but really, like Eric was said, the greatest records of all time, most of them are made as teams. And I'm a huge fan of collaboration. I understand like when a lot of people start out, younger producers, they kind of get in this, I have to do everything or else it's money out of my pocket. And then they get a little smarter and they realize it is short-term, but long-term you win. Because when you start sending work around to people, they start sending work around to you and you get cool opportunities you would have never had a chance to get. So I'm a huge fan of collaboration. I would rather, and this also goes to AI. It's like we have a music industry as long as we collaborate together. It doesn't matter what robot, what it does, it literally doesn't. Matters is if you want to work with people and you work with people, we all continue to do this when we make music and the industry thrives. So I like to collaborate with people because it's like if a producer sends me bands, I'm going to send them bands back. If a label or a manager, like I do everything I can to send people work and they send me work back and it's great. Like a collaborative approach is very, very, very important.
Well, we're almost out of time, and I want to get these questions in. So Christopher asked, what's the best way for a small band to budget so they can consistently release music while covering mixing, mastering, and marketing costs? So that sounds like an independent artist more there. But yeah, anybody want to tackle kind of how to budget covering some of those costs?
Nico.
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is obviously just keep working your ass off. I think the biggest thing is play shows, sell merch, make that stuff quality. At the end of the day, that's where bands make their most money. You're not going to ever see a huge paycheck from streaming, and you might be able to monetize some stuff on social media and whatnot, but get out there, grind, play shows, and print some good merch, man. I think that's going to be the best way to budget outside of your personal work life and everything that you save on the side too.
And
Oh, go ahead. You go. I was just going to say, we kind of talked about it earlier. I think like because I did this when I was like in a local band. We got a business loan, and it's not that crazy to get an LLC for the band. Like, just treat it like we were saying, like a business, and get a bunch of serious people involved. And I mean, you're talking to 3 dudes who are making a living in this crazy. I mean, we shouldn't be making a living in the craziest job ever in making music. So we figured it out. I mean, there's ways to do it. I have face tat. I look like I just got out of prison, and I'm making a living out of this crazy, so it's like it's possible for anybody. When I came out here, I had nothing. I was Uber driving. I was building IKEA furniture. I was like, just whatever it took to, make a living out here. So if you want it bad enough, I think, not to sound like I'm not one of those guys who walks over a homeless guy and he's like, get a job, buddy. Like, I know it's like, there's levels, and some people it's just not possible. But generally speaking, if you want it bad enough, I think you can do it.
And just having a DIY approach, like, if you really want to do this stuff on a budget, roll up your sleeves and figure out how much you can do yourself, and join URM, or there's lots of resources to learn production and mixing yourself and be able to start some of this yourself before you're able to pay other people. And Federico asked, what would you recommend to a metalcore hardcore band that started this year and is getting some traction locally and also outside of the country, Italy? Go independent or pitch to a label. If label, small local label, or medium, bigger label?
Depends on the goal of the project, I think. Like, how big do you want to go? Like, who are you trying to be? I think they got to answer that question first, because you got to begin with the end in mind. Like, if you're going to go to a label, for example, the label is going to put money behind you. So, in order to be presentable to a label, like, what things would a label want to see, right? You got to check those boxes and stuff like that. So I think first identify what you want to be, what level you want to play at, and how big you want to go. Nico, where you going to?
Yeah, well said. And the only thing I guess I would add to that is, if you're building traction in your local scene and surrounding areas, you're doing all the right things, because that's where it starts. You can't expect, I mean, I guess it's a little bit different genres and whatnot, but if you're in a metal hardcore band and you're playing shows and that's the main thing, you want to be on tour for the majority of your career, you have to start in your local scene. You can't expect somebody across the world to want to listen to your music and come see you live if you can't get the kids in your hometown to come play, or to come see you play live. So you're on the right track, and I guess keep doing what you're doing. But yeah, internalize and figure out what the goal of the projects are. I think that's great.
Yeah. He just said, we're definitely trying to go big. We're working our asses off on every aspect, from production to our image to ads.
All right, then I would say get with a real producer, meaning somebody who's somebody. Like, even if you write most of your stuff, simply, like Eric was talking about, just collaborating and getting in the room, getting some names on your stuff. To me, that's like a good qualifier. Again, think about it reverse. If you're a record label or, a business, and you're going to invest in somebody, what things do you want to see? So going in and be like, hey, Nico, check out my band. We just worked with X person and Y person, and we did this, and here's our shows and our numbers. That gets taken, and this is just my opinion, I think, a little bit more seriously than like, check out my band, bro, in the DM on Instagram. It's a lot easier to be like, yeah, man, I just hired Eric to do the record, and then we had, this dude master it and this and that. It's like that gets taken very seriously, because somebody's serious when they spend money. And they're not playing around and screwing around.
Yeah, nailed it. And those are brownie points, especially if I know the person who you worked with. I've worked with them in the past, or if I'm just familiar with their credits. So yeah, totally agree.
Yeah, I think, believe in yourself, and don't wait for permission from somebody else. And that that makes other people want to work with you when they see, like, you're going to go do this either way. But if you're just waiting for somebody else's permission, you might be waiting a long time. So start and put yourself out there.
Don't waste your opportunity.
I had 2 local bands. I got signed to majors that I developed many years ago from my home city of Milwaukee, where nothing comes out of. And the way that I did it is, we made 2 bands that were too big to ignore, where people just came after them, where it just showed up on the radar. So again, great songs, great branding, great image, great everything. You found the right type of sound at the right time with the right front person, with the right, there's a lot of things that have to go right, but the production, everything was there in the package. And then when it came out, it got people's attention right away, because most bands are not that on that level, where like they're just like they're not ready to, they don't come out looking like a national touring band, but they're like a local band playing their first show. So when you come out like that, and all of a sudden 2 months later you can put 400 tickets in your local market that you can sell, and you're starting to pop, and all of a sudden you blow up on MySpace or SoundCloud or whatever, you better believe A&Rs are going to be like, hey, I just saw you in Billboard as one of the hottest, and this is a true story. Like one of my bands, I had a band, Vinyl Theater. They're like, you're the #1 unsigned band. Like, Steve Robertson gets on a plane from Fueled by Ramen, Atlantic Records, and he comes to meet you in your, in your house and talk to you and see what you guys got going on, because you just came out of nowhere, and all of a sudden now, how did you do it? Like, we want to get in on this. Like, this is hot, so figure out how to do that. And, these guys will be lining up to make you offers and fighting each other in the streets.
Well, let's wrap there. Thank you all, Joel, Eric, Nico. Appreciate you guys taking some time, and hope everybody enjoyed this. We will get a recording and clips out and stuff. And yeah, look forward to connecting more with all of you guys as business and life goes on. So thank you again for taking the time out to share your wisdom today.
Thanks, James.
Thanks, guys.
Appreciate it.
Have a good rest of your night.
Thanks,
Thanks, everybody.
Later, y'all.
Signing out.
If you found this conversation to be valuable, please take a moment to like the video and make sure you're subscribed. It helps more independent artists discover these conversations. FiXT Academy is also supported by our Patreon members. If you want deeper conversations, extended sessions, and direct access to what we're building here, you can join us there. The link is in the description.